Her lifeless body lay on the stainless steel autopsy table, eyes still wide open, as if frozen in a final moment of terror. But what truly horrified the coroner wasn't the stare. It was the empty cavity inside her skull. Her brain was missing. No blood. No trauma. Just gone. Lena Hartwell's life on the surface seemed like the embodiment of a rising academic star. She was 28, brilliant, deeply committed to her field, and only months away from presenting a groundbreaking thesis that could have changed the face of neuroscience. But those closest to her, few as they were, had started to notice changes. Her once bright demeanor had grown shadowed in the last few weeks of her life. Friends said she stopped answering calls after dark. She'd begun taking strange routes home and once asked a barista if he'd seen the man with the silver pen watching her from the corner. Most dismissed it as the stress of academic pressure. Lena, after all, was diving into uncharted territory, brainwave interference, dream state pattern recognition, and some say even a neural mapping theory that could simulate thought transmission. Her thesis advisor, Dr. Marcus Yarrow, told authorities Lena was working on something far beyond what her classmates or department had seen before. At one point, she even suggested that, with the right setup, a machine could intercept not just brain signals, but interpret them, translating mental intent into readable data. She wanted to see thoughts before they became words, Yarrow confessed. But what Lena hadn't told him, at least not openly, was that she believed someone was already doing it. A week before her death, she sent an encrypted message to a former classmate stating, "They've been testing this on people. It works. Too well. I'm not safe anymore." When detectives entered her apartment after the building's superintendent reported an odd, lingering chemical odor, they found the door locked from the inside. No signs of struggle. Her body lay neatly in the center of the room on a futon mattress, clothed, undisturbed. Her eyes were fixed upward, her expression frozen in horror. But the true nightmare began when the medical examiner conducted the autopsy. Her skull had been opened, not with force but with surgical precision. Not a single drop of excess blood. Not a cracked bone. Just a clean extraction, her entire brain missing. The forensic report made one chilling observation. This was done by someone who knew the architecture of the human brain intimately, and wasn't in a hurry. In the corner of Lena's room was a corkboard covered in articles, photographs, and hand-scribbled notes. Among the scrawl were dozens of references to a term repeated over and over, Project Morpheus. Some were highlighted. Others were nearly torn through. A sticky note bore the phrase, "Not a theory anymore. It's active." No one in the department had heard of such a project, but Lena seemed obsessed. Her last online search, retrieved through deep server records, was for an off-the-books military contractor known only by a code name, Axiom 7. The company had no web presence, no registered office, and no identifiable executives, but a name linked to it appeared in Lena's notes. A Dr. Emmerich Calder, a neurobiologist long rumored to be involved in secret research during the Cold War involving dream manipulation and psychological reconditioning. As the investigation stretched into its second week, Lena's case took a darker turn. The friend who had received Lena's encrypted message, Eli Grant, vanished. He was last seen boarding a train to visit Lena's parents in Michigan, but never arrived. His phone last pinged near a forested area where no cameras were operational. His disappearance was treated as unrelated by local authorities, citing lack of evidence of foul play. Lena's family, heartbroken and frustrated, began their own search but were met with silence, and eventually surveillance. Lena's younger sister, Nina, claimed their home internet was being monitored. A neighbor saw unmarked vans parked near the family's property on multiple nights, their engines running, occupants never stepping out. Even more troubling, Lena's research backup drive, which had been stored at the university's private archive, was reported missing by the department's IT manager. Only authorized personnel could access that level of security. When questioned, no one admitted to retrieving the drive. Security footage, which should have captured every movement in the data room, mysteriously looped the same 30 seconds for nearly 4 hours the night it disappeared. The closer one looked into Lena's life, the more it felt like she had peeled back the curtain on something enormous. Something institutional, well-funded, and deeply hidden. She had once written in a journal entry, "If I disappear, it won't be suicide. They don't want to kill me. They want to use me. And if they can't do that, they'll erase what I know." They didn't just erase her. They erased what made her who she was. Her mind, her literal brain, was taken as if it were the last puzzle piece someone else needed. Maybe for replication. Maybe for control. No matter the reason, one thing was certain. Lena had found something, and whoever they were, they made sure she would never share it. The apartment complex where Lena Hartwell lived was secured by electronic locks, motion-sensitive hallway cameras, and a digitally maintained entry log, standard for university housing affiliated with high-level research students. Yet somehow all of it failed to capture anything useful the night Lena died. The security footage from the third floor, which would have shown her hallway and front door, was corrupted. Not erased, corrupted. According to the building's technician, the video feed was interrupted for exactly 32 minutes, the same window Lena's time of death was estimated to have occurred. Even more unsettling, the digital access logs didn't show any entries or exits from her unit during that time. It was as if whoever had done this didn't need to force their way in. Detectives interviewed every tenant on Lena's floor. Most said they'd heard nothing, no scuffle, no screams, no late-night visitors. Just silence. Too much silence, one officer noted in his report. That part of the building was usually lively, with students coming and going at all hours. But that night, there were no reports of movement, no delivery drop-offs, not even the usual hum of passing footsteps. Only one person claimed to have seen something. Agnes Berriman, a retired librarian who lived across the hall, mentioned seeing a tall man in a black suit with leather gloves standing outside Lena's door the day before her body was found. She remembered him clearly, not because of his appearance, but because he carried a small silver briefcase and stood unervingly still, as if listening through the door. Agnes, curious and somewhat alarmed, stepped out to confront him. But before she could speak, he turned his head slightly and said, "Wrong floor," in a perfectly calm voice. Then he left without waiting for the elevator. When police returned to follow up with Agnes a few days later, her tone had changed. She said she'd been mistaken, that perhaps the man was a maintenance worker. But the investigating officer noted in his report that Agnes seemed nervous, glancing toward the hallway more than once during the conversation. When gently pressed, she simply said, "Sometimes it's safer not to remember things." Her phone was later found disconnected, and a call to her emergency contact, a niece, confirmed that Agnes had suddenly left town without warning. Her apartment was cleared out within a day. Meanwhile, Lena's laptop, which was central to her research, had been wiped remotely. Digital forensics traced the signal to an external IP in Switzerland, routed through at least 6 proxies. All files, notes, personal messages, gone. Only the BIOS password remained, a cryptic phrase that read, "I dream in static." Investigators initially thought it was meaningless, but Lena's research logs retrieved from her lab's shared cloud drive showed that she often described her brainwave experiments in terms of static bursts and neural haze. Detectives reached out to the university's cyber defense consultant, who reviewed the incident and concluded that the wipe was executed using a program not commercially available. The tool used left behind no logs, no timestamps, and no trace of user identity. It was the kind of software known only to government cyber units or private black-budget contractors. One chilling fact emerged. The software signature matched a digital fingerprint previously associated with the breach of a U.S. Air Force neural simulation lab in 2019. That case had also gone cold and was heavily classified. Despite the digital blackout, Lena's physical research journal remained. In it were sketches, human brains, dream state pattern clusters, and what appeared to be wiring diagrams for a neural interface. But what puzzled detectives were the entries at the end. They weren't scientific. They were personal and frantic. One read, "They're watching every test. I don't know how, but it's like the interface is watching me too." Another, nearly illegible, said, "The thoughts aren't just mine anymore." By this point, the case was attracting attention beyond local authorities. 2 men from an unnamed federal agency appeared at the precinct. They offered to assist with the case and requested full access to the evidence. They wore no badges, carried no business cards, and left no contact information. When asked about jurisdiction, they simply stated, "We have authority where this intersects with national defense." After their visit, the case files were transferred to another location. The local detectives were told to redirect all inquiries to Washington. One officer, Detective Rios, wasn't willing to let it go. He had lost sleep over the Lena Hartwell case, disturbed by the precision, the vanishing witnesses, the coordinated silences. He made a private backup of Lena's journal before the feds took everything. He began interviewing faculty members off the record. But then, 3 weeks later, he suffered a complete mental breakdown during a traffic stop. Dashcam footage captured him shouting about eyes behind screens and voices hiding inside the noise. He was placed under psychiatric evaluation, diagnosed with acute paranoid delusions. But some of his colleagues whispered otherwise. that he'd seen something too close to the truth and been silenced in a different way. All of it, the corrupted files, the neighbors silenced by fear, the federal ghosts erasing footprints, pointed to something much bigger than a single murder. Lena had clearly stumbled upon a project or a technology that was never meant to be seen by the public. Someone was not just cleaning up a crime, they were cleansing history bit by bit, person by person. The further one tried to dig, the faster the earth was replaced over the grave. The surgical removal of Lena Hartwell's brain had been so precise, so unnaturally clean, that it shook the coroner to his core. There was no sign of hesitation in the cuts, no irregularity in the incisions. It wasn't just skill, it was mastery. Whoever had done this had operated with tools far beyond standard medical equipment. The tissue had been separated without tearing, and the cranial opening showed microscopic precision, as if guided by something more sophisticated than a surgeon's hand. It was no longer just a murder, it was a message and perhaps a demonstration. The medical examiner's report was chilling in its understatement. Procedure consistent with experimental neurosurgery. No bleeding suggests postmortem extraction or advanced coagulation techniques. Unknown instrument used. No known surgical tools could make cuts that clean without leaving trace indicators. There was no bruising, no swelling, not even microscopic trauma. That alone sparked theories that what happened to Lena had not been done in a rush or even in the typical human way. It had been planned, executed, and rehearsed, possibly on others. Following this gruesome discovery, a new name began to surface in whispers and unconfirmed reports: Dr. Emmerich Calder. A former government neurosurgeon turned recluse, Calder had reportedly vanished in the early 2000s after being linked to ethically condemned experiments involving consciousness separation and dream harvesting. His name was officially erased from university archives and research journals, yet several of Lena's handwritten notes referenced Calder's wall, an alleged neural barrier theory meant to partition layers of thought within the human mind. According to an old thesis fragment recovered from a former colleague, Calder had once proposed that by isolating dream cognition from rational thought, you could manipulate subconscious behavior, implanting decisions before the conscious mind even became aware of them. The theory was rejected, labeled science fiction. But Lena, it seemed, didn't believe it was fiction at all. She'd been corresponding with someone through encrypted messages on a dark research network. Someone who signed every message with just a lowercase e. The final message in her recovered journal read, "He says it's working. They're extracting from live subjects now. He wants to meet." After her death, efforts to trace this mysterious E went nowhere. All digital footprints vanished, and attempts to reconstruct the messages led to dead ends and virus-laced data traps. But there was one clue left behind: an old email account Lena had used during a research internship overseas. One unsent draft sat saved in her outbox. Calder is real, not dead. And he's not working alone. The deeper investigators pushed into the trail of Calder, the stranger things became. Several universities that had once housed his research denied he ever existed. Medical licensing boards claimed no record. Even Freedom of Information Act requests turned up empty, returned with full-page redactions or outright denials. But a retired intelligence officer, speaking on the condition of anonymity, revealed that Calder had been involved with an off-the-books initiative called Project Kraken, a Cold War relic aimed at mapping and disrupting human memory patterns through remote neurostimulation. The officer described Calder as brilliant but unhinged, a man who saw the mind not as sacred, but as something to be decoded and controlled. According to this source, Calder had developed a prototype neural interface that could scan and replicate brainwave frequencies in real time. It wasn't just a recording device, it was a translator, converting neural impulses into code. If such a device had fallen into the wrong hands, or worse, been perfected, then Lena's murder wasn't just an isolated crime. It was the harvesting of intellectual property embedded in her very tissue. Around the time Lena's case was being quietly buried, a pattern began to emerge across the country. Several young neuroscience and biotech students went missing. All of them had been working on related fields: neuroplasticity, AI cognitive modeling, dream state analysis. Their disappearances were never connected in the press, and most were explained away as voluntary dropouts or suicides. But one former classmate of Lena's compiled the cases into a private blog before it too was taken down. Before it vanished, one line stood out: "They're not killing the data. They're collecting it." As the last pieces of Lena's world were erased, her journals, research, digital identity, one final act of horror completed the circle. The lead forensic analyst assigned to Lena's case disappeared from her home without a trace. Her house remained untouched. Her car still parked. Her keys on the counter. The only thing missing was her laptop and her dog-eared copy of Lena's autopsy file. Inside her office, taped to the wall, was a quote in black marker. "You can erase a person's voice, but you cannot silence the truth it once carried." Whether it was Calder behind the mask or a system built upon his forbidden theories, the truth was now larger than any one victim. Lena Hartwell hadn't just stumbled onto something dangerous, she had become the prototype of a future war not fought with bullets or bombs, but with memory, perception, and the core of consciousness itself. And as her brain sat in some hidden lab, pulsing with secrets, the world above went on, completely unaware of the quiet, surgical war being waged in the dark.